most generous qualification periods in the world. Prior to the changes, it was 10 years, and it's still one of the most generous. It's gone to 15 years. In fact, they're only, if you look at the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, they have a database that follows pensions in countries. And if you look in their database, there are only 6 countries that qualify people for a full minimum pension as quickly as Barbados. Only 6. The average qualification period for a full minimum pension is 29 years. So we have this system. It's generous. It's generous for historical reasons. We want to protect the old in their we want to protect them against financial distress in the old age, especially those at the lower end of the income scale. We want to maintain this. So it's a very good reason for maintaining the minimum pension. But it's a little too easy to qualify with only 500 contributions, just 10 years out of a working life that might start at 20. In some countries, you've got to work, for example, in France, 43 years to get the full minimum pension. Not everybody realizes that when you see the French in the street protesting the age increase, but they have other constraints that we don't have. So 10 to 15 years was seen as a very reasonable move. We're still in a very small, relatively elite group of countries that do that. Now, the third change relates to, and this is really an actuarial change, how quickly you accumulate rights to the full minimum pension. So it's what's called an accrual rate, how quickly you earn these rights. So in 1967, when the scheme was first implemented, if you start from the day before when there's nothing, and then the next day there's something, you have people who are sort of aged between 40 and 55. If you give them the parameters that a traditional mature system has, they'll never earn sufficient rights to get a living pension when they retire. So at its origins, the accrual rate was quite quick and allowed people to get rights very quickly, just so that they would have something when they did come to retire. But our system is now relatively mature. So instead, as before, when you could qualify after 35 years to a full maximum pension, not the minimum pension, but the maximum you could earn, now it's going to be 40 years. And again, this is in line with other standards that you can find around the world. It's not extraordinary, and it doesn't change what's at the heart of our system, which is the promise of this full minimum wage. That's the thing we're trying to protect and make sure that it's still delivered at a reasonable price, that its adequacy is sufficient, and it's well above various thresholds that have been defined by the World Bank. The IDB came down here and did a study. So we've believed that we've done that because the socioeconomic benefits are really what we're trying to protect here. And I should just say, when we're talking about the implementation of these measures, that they don't affect everybody in the same way. So for example, the change from 500 weeks to 750 weeks, that has no impact on you over 60 as of the 1st of January 2024. And the entire phasing, all the way these measures are being phased in, is visible in the Revitalization report, which is a public document available on the NIS website. It's in one of the appendixes, and anybody can go and look at how they will be affected by the changes by consulting that appendix in that document. So once you don't touch contributions, the other areas you can look at are compliance and investment returns. So the board has spoken a great deal about compliance and how to improve compliance, because we know that there is a difference between what is owed and what is paid. And we have estimates of what we think that is. And the board knows that the NIS has all sorts of measures at its disposal, from just dialogue with the people to understand their situation and why they're not complying. And very often this is not individuals, this is companies that we're talking about. We encourage them to make agreements, so even if they can't pay everything up front, they can at least have a schedule to get it done. And there are also legal means where the negotiations get protracted, or if the board feels that a company is not acting in good faith, that can also be undertaken. Now, I even heard the minister on the floor of Parliament say that compliance is going to be an area that has to be looked at carefully, and they're going to exert as much pressure as possible to improve compliance. And I'm going to assume, by whatever means are available for the NIS to get that job done. And the final measure I'll talk about here, although the details are in the Revitalization Reform Report, is investment returns. There is a perception that investment returns are an easy thing boost. That's not really the case. The nominal return of the fund is actually very respectable since it began. It's about 5.8%, I believe. But one of the huge constraints on the fund has been access to foreign exchange, and it's meant that the fund has had to look nearly exclusively for opportunities in Barbados, and it's actually 80% invested in Barbados. Now, that's not the best position to be in if your goal is to provide cover for a scheme that is actually 100% invested in Barbados. Those contributors and those pensioners, they're exposed completely to the tides of fortune, if you like, in the Barbados economy. So ideally, you would have a backing fund that has good diversification geographically. So it so happens that since we published the report in which one of the recommendations was to seek an agreement with the central bank to grant access to foreign exchange for the fund to diversify, we've had those discussions. I met with the new governor, Governor Greenidge, on that, and we've agreed in a first year that $40 million is made available to the fund to start diversifying. And indeed, the very first investment has been made with that money. It's in U.S. Treasury bonds. I think it's about $5 million US. And it's by design, we hope it to be a rolling agreement. So come next year when we want another 40 million, if macroeconomic conditions permit, the central bank will grant us that money. Now what that means, that 40 million a year, over economic cycle, which might be 6 to 8 years, we are able to improve diversification by about 5 percentage points. So that gives you a lot of margin to change from government bonds to overseas equities to real estate or what have you, in accordance with the guidelines that already exist at the NIS. So this is a big win, that piece of news for us, because it's almost like viewing your portfolio as a chair with one leg. It's not very stable at the moment, you know. But over time, 40 million a year, for a couple of economic cycles, you get to add a second leg and a third leg until eventually you got a chair with 4 legs that's stable and can do the job that we really want it to do. So finally, let me actually mention 2 additional measures. I covered the major ones, but there are 2 other items. It used to be in the calculation of the formula pension that the formula used the 5 best years of earnings to arrive at a number. And now we're changing that to 10 years. And there are a couple of reasons for that. 5 years already is really quite a modest number. And what we found was that there was a segment of the population paying in at a high rate for 5 years and then reducing that amount very, very significantly, knowing that they would still get the full pension. So to promote adherence, we've increased that to 10 years. We'd like the spirit of the scheme to be better respected than it was in the past. And the other measure covers the cost of living allowance. So there will still be a cost of living increase every year for pensioners. It's going to be 3% in 2023 and up to 1.5% in the following 2 years. Now the change there is that had the existing formula said in 2025 it should be 1.8%, we're capping it at 1.5% because we have to keep a link between the benefits that are paid out and the contributions that are coming in. So we grant something, but we don't want it to be out of proportion to the income that the scheme is earning. However, there is an exception to that if inflation is particularly aggressive. I think it's over 3% on a rolling average. Then the actuary is going to be requested to tell us what a reasonable increase would be. So by putting in that final point, we're aiming to make sure that if inflation does become very aggressive, that we can still take care of people despite the 1.5% cap. So the overall effect of these measures was considered by the core group that was looking at them, and they strove to find the right balance of benefit adequacy, affordability of contributions, and measures that were going to bring financial stability to the system for at least a quarter of a century. And quite a few scenarios were modeled, and really there's only one, with the age of retirement in particular, that keeps affordability in check whilst balancing out the other objectives of adequacy of benefits and affordability of contributions. And we now show that we're moving from a date of depletion, a best estimate from the 17th Actuarial Review of 2036 to 2052. And we're also able to keep the overall cost of the systems, the pay-as-you-go cost, which currently runs at 24%. We're able to keep that in the range 24 to 26% up to 2050, at which point it starts to actually drop and drop below 24%. And that's almost entirely due to this 1-year rise in the age of retirement, in combination with these other measures that, of course, do their part. But there's great sensitivity around the age gap. So in concluding this particular segment, I think it's also worth thanking those in that core group who contributed their expertise, and included the actuary, Derek Osborne, former chair of the NIS, Dr. Justin Robinson, Wismar Graves, also a former member of the NIS board, Marsha Cattle, MP, economist, Crystal Drake, Senator Crystal Drake, also an economist, Sir Roy Trotman, of course, a union leader, and I was in there also. This is a team effort, and a lot of consultation was done around it, so I'm very thankful for their help and guidance and expertise.